I got home and my key wasn't working. I called my mom. We changed the lock and took your apartment as part of the payment for raising you. I replied, you have 10 minutes to get out. And by the 11th minute, all their things were. My name is Esteban, I'm 29 years old, and I work as a systems engineer at a multinational company, earning $6,800 a month. It's a salary that allows me to live well, but for years, it has been constantly drained by two people who turned the act of raising me into an eternal debt that I would never finish repaying. My parents, Hector and Norma, aged 56 and 54 respectively, never held stable jobs in their lives, always working sporadic jobs that lasted a few months before they quit or were fired for one reason or another. And by the time I was 20 and got my first decent job after graduating from college, they had already decided that I would be their retirement plan. We raised you for 20 years, my father told me the day I got my first job as a junior programmer, earning $2,200 a month. Now it's your turn to take care of us. It's only fair after everything we did for you. We sacrificed so much, my mother added, with tears in her eyes. Although I knew they were tears of manipulation, not genuine emotion, she continued, we never had anything for ourselves because we gave it all to you. So now that you have a good job, it's your obligation to help us. And like the naive young man I was, filled with guilt implanted since childhood, I agreed to help them. I started by paying the rent for a small, two-bedroom house in a modest neighborhood, which cost $800 a month, in addition to giving them an extra $600 for their food, utilities, and basic needs. In total, I was giving them $1,400 of my $2,200 monthly salary, leaving me with just $800 for myself. It's temporary, they constantly told me, just until your father gets a stable job. But that stable job never came because my father never really looked for one. Why work when his son was paying for everything? The years went by. I changed jobs, looking for better opportunities and higher salaries. By the time I was 25, I was earning $4,500 a month as a senior engineer, and instead of being able to enjoy that raise, it simply meant my parents expected more from me. The house is falling apart, my mother complained constantly. The roof leaks, the walls have damp. We need a better house. So, I increased the rent budget to $1,200 so they could move to a house in better condition. I also increased their monthly allowance to $1,000 because, with inflation, everything is more expensive and it's not enough for us. In total, I was now giving them $2,200 a month while I myself lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment that cost $600 a month, because all my extra money went to them. But it was never enough. There was always something more they needed. There was always an emergency that required additional money. There was always a reason why I had to give more. We raised you. That was the magic phrase they used every time I showed the slightest resistance. Are you going to deny help to the parents who gave you life, who sacrificed for you? What kind of son are you? And the guilt ate away at me, so I just kept paying, and paying, and paying. But inside, I was secretly saving. Every penny I could hide, I put into an account my parents didn't know about. For 3 years, I saved obsessively, sacrificing every personal luxury, eating cheaply, not going out with friends, not buying new clothes unless it was absolutely necessary. And finally, at 29, I managed to save $85,000 for the down payment on a beautiful 3-bedroom apartment in a modern building with security, a gym, and a common area, located in an excellent neighborhood. The apartment cost $280,000 in total, and with my down payment, I secured a mortgage with monthly payments of $800, which I could comfortably afford now that I was earning $6,800 a month. It was my achievement, my effort, my future finally materialized in a space that would be completely mine. I moved in with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in my adult life, I had a real home, spacious, modern, comfortable, all mine. Of course, my parents weren't happy for me. When I told them I had bought an apartment, their first reaction wasn't pride or happiness, but pure envy. 3 bedrooms, my father said in an accusatory tone when I invited him to see it. Why do you need 3 bedrooms if you live alone? It's a waste, my mother added, looking around with a bitter expression, while we're still in that old house and you have all this space for yourself. I just worked hard to get this, I said defensively, though I knew I shouldn't have to justify myself. I saved for years. You should give it to us, my father blurted out suddenly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We'll live here, and you can find something smaller and cheaper. After all, we raised you, so you owe it to us. I stared at them in shock. Are you serious? Completely serious, my mother said, crossing her arms. You've been living selfishly, buying this luxurious place for yourself while we're still in that horrible house. It's time you paid us back properly for raising you. No, I said firmly, though my heart was racing because confronting them always made me nervous. This apartment is mine. I bought it with my money, my savings, my effort. I'm not giving it to you. You're an ungrateful son, my father spat, venom in his voice. After everything we did for you. I've been paying you $2,200 a month for years, I reminded them, feeling anger build inside me. That's more than enough. It will never be enough to compensate for the 20 years we raised you, my mother said coldly. But fine, keep your selfish apartment. Just remember that we are your parents, and one day you'll owe us. They left that day, angry, and for the next few weeks, the calls and messages were colder, more distant, but I kept paying their bills because the guilt was still there, deeply ingrained in me. Time passed, and one day I received news from my job. I had to travel to an important conference in another city for 3 days. It was an excellent opportunity for networking and possibly getting a promotion, so I obviously accepted. The problem was my dog, Max, a 4-year-old who was my faithful companion and needed to be fed, taken to the park, and cared for while I was away. Normally, I would leave him at a doggy daycare, but this was a last-minute trip and I didn't have time. I called my parents without much hope. I need a favor, I said when my mother answered. I have to travel for work for 3 days and I need someone to look after Max. Could you come to my apartment twice a day to feed him and take him to the park? There was a long silence on the other end. Then I heard my parents talking in low voices, though I couldn't make out the words. Okay, my mother finally said in a strangely cheerful tone. We'll take care of Max. No problem. Thank you, I said, relieved. I'll leave the keys in the building's security lockbox. Perfect, son, said my father, who had joined the call. Don't worry about a thing, Max will be well taken care of. I should have suspected something. That sudden kindness after weeks of coldness should have been a giant red flag, but I was busy preparing for my trip and I trusted that, at the very least, they would take good care of my dog. I left early Tuesday morning, left the keys in the lockbox as we had agreed, and caught my flight. The conference was a success. I made excellent contacts, my presentation was well received, and my boss hinted that a promotion was on the horizon. I returned on Friday afternoon, feeling optimistic about my professional future. I arrived at my apartment building around 5 p.m., carrying my travel bag and eager to see Max and rest in my own bed. I took out my spare set of keys, the ones I always carried with me in addition to the main set I had left for my parents. I went up to the 4th floor where my apartment was and inserted the key into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again with more force, thinking maybe it was stuck, but nothing. The key simply wouldn't work. It was as if the lock was completely different. I frowned in confusion. Maybe they had left the deadbolt on from the inside. But that wouldn't make sense because the key wasn't even going in properly. Then I heard voices inside the apartment. Voices that sounded like my parents. I knocked loudly on the door. Hello? Is anyone in there? The voices immediately went silent. I waited, but no one opened the door. I knocked again, harder. Hey, it's Esteban. My key isn't working. Finally, I took out my phone and called my mother. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hello, she said in a cautious tone. "Mom, I'm outside the apartment and my key isn't working," I said, trying to stay calm. "Are you guys inside? Did something happen to the lock?" There was a long, too long silence. Then I heard my mother speak to my father in a low voice again. "Mom," I said more firmly, "what's going on?" "Esteban," she finally said, in a tone that made my blood run cold, a mix of defiance and self-justification. "We changed the lock. We took your apartment as part of the payment for raising you." I stood completely paralyzed in the hallway, unable to process what I had just heard. "What?" was all I could say. "The truth is, the house we were living in was too small and inadequate," my mother continued, as if she were explaining something completely reasonable. "And this apartment is exactly what we deserve after all the years we raised you and sacrificed for you. So now it's ours. Go away and don't bother us." And she hung up. I just stood there in the hallway with the phone still to my ear, my brain desperately trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. My parents had taken my apartment, changed the locks, stolen my home. The shock lasted for about 30 seconds, then it was replaced by a cold, calculated rage I had never felt before. I dialed my mother's number again. "What do you want?" she answered, annoyed. "You have 10 minutes to get out of my apartment," I said, my voice so cold I barely recognized it as my own. "10 minutes, or you will regret it for the rest of your lives." "We're not going anywhere," my mother laughed. "This apartment is ours now. I already told you. It's our payment for raising you. Go away and leave us alone." 9.5 minutes, I said and hung up. I immediately Googled emergency express locksmith and found one that promised to arrive in under 15 minutes. I called and explained my situation. "I'm locked out of my own apartment," I said. "I need you to come immediately. I'll pay triple the rate." "I'll be there in 10 minutes, the locksmith said. Then, I called 911. "I need to report a home invasion," I said when the operator answered. "I'm at the door of my apartment, and there are intruders who have changed the lock and are refusing to leave." "Do you have documents to prove the apartment is yours?" the operator asked. "I have the deed scanned on my phone," I said, "and I can show my ID which matches the address." "We're sending a patrol car immediately," the operator said. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat on the hallway floor with my back against the wall, staring at the door to my apartment, which was now being denied to me. I could hear movement inside, muffled voices, probably my parents arguing about what to do. At exactly the 9-minute mark, the locksmith arrived, a man of about 45 with a toolbox. "Is this your apartment?" he asked. "Yes," I said, showing him my ID and the deed on my phone. "There are people inside who changed the lock without my permission." "I understand," he said, taking out his tools. "This will take about 5 minutes." He started working on the lock, the sound of the drill echoing in the hallway. I immediately heard alarmed shouts from inside the apartment. "What's going on?" my father yelled. "Who's out there?" "Open the door," I said in a loud voice. "Or we will open it ourselves." "This is our apartment now," my mother shouted. "Go away or we'll call the police." "I already called the police," I said without emotion. "They'll be here any minute." I heard panic from the other side, voices arguing heatedly, but it was too late. The locksmith finished his work and the lock gave way. I threw the door open, and there they were, my parents. My father was sitting on my couch, watching my television as if he had every right in the world. My mother was standing in the kitchen with an expression of shock that quickly turned to indignation. "Get out of here," my father yelled, getting to his feet. "This house is ours now." "No, it's not," I said, walking in with the locksmith behind me as a witness. "This house is mine. It's in my name. I bought it with my money, and you have just committed a crime called breaking and entering. We raised you for 20 years, my mother began with her rehearsed speech. You owe us this and much more. I've paid you over $200,000 in the last 9 years, I calculated quickly in my head. That's not even counting the extra expenses and emergencies you always had. So if raising me costs that much, then I've already paid you back with interest and have change left over. That's not enough, my father spat. It will never be enough. You're right, I said with deadly calm. It will never be enough for you because you are two parasites who have turned the natural act of being parents into a business of emotional blackmail. How dare you, my mother screamed. I dare because I'm tired, I said, feeling years of repressed anger finally coming out. Tired of the guilt, tired of the manipulation, tired of being treated like a walking ATM. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. It was 2 police officers. We received a report of a home invasion, one of them said. Yes, I said, showing them my ID and the apartment deed on my phone. These 2 people are my parents. I gave them keys temporarily to look after my dog while I was away. But when I returned, they had changed the locks and are refusing to leave, claiming the apartment is now theirs. The officers looked at the documents, then looked at my parents. Is this true? The officer asked. He owes us this, my mother said desperately. We raised him, we sacrificed for him. This apartment is our payment. Ma'am, the officer said in a patient but firm tone. The property is legally in your son's name. You have no legal right to it. You need to vacate immediately, or we will have to arrest you for trespassing. No, my father yelled. You can't do this to us. Sir, said the second officer, now with less patience. You have 2 options. You can leave voluntarily right now, or we can arrest you, and you'll leave in handcuffs. You choose. My parents looked at me with expressions that mixed shock, fury, and finally, fear. Esteban, please, my mother begged, with tears that, this time, seemed genuine. Don't do this. We're your parents. Get out, I said, without a shred of sympathy. You abused my trust in the most vile way possible. The officers escorted my parents to the door while they hastily gathered some of their things. They had brought bags of clothes, toiletries, things that clearly showed they had planned to stay permanently. Esteban, wait, my mother pleaded at the door. What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? Not my problem, I said. You should have thought of that before you betrayed me. But the rent, my father said with real panic. You're still going to pay the rent for the house where we live, right? No, I said with absolute certainty. As of this moment, I am canceling every bill I pay for you. The rent, the utilities, the monthly allowance seats all over. You can't do that, my mother screamed. We'll be on the street. Then get jobs, I said with the same coldness they had treated me with on the phone just half an hour earlier. Work, like I've been working since I was 20 while you lived off my effort. We raised you, my father shouted one last time, playing his final guilt card. And I paid you for it for 9 years, I replied. More than any upbringing is worth. We're even now more than even. So never use that excuse with me again. You are an ungrateful son, my mother spat. No, I said, closing the door in their faces. I'm a son who finally learned to say no. I bolted the door as their shouts of protest faded down the hallway. The locksmith, who had witnessed the entire drama, looked at me with an expression of respect. I need you to change the lock completely, I told him. A new, different one, with keys that only I have. Understood, he said, taking a new lock out of his toolbox. This will take about 20 minutes. While he worked, I sat on my couch in my apartment, and for the first time in years, I felt something I had forgotten. Peace. Not guilt, not obligation, not fear. Just peace. Max came running out of one of the bedrooms where my parents had apparently locked him in. He jumped on me, overjoyed to see me, and I hugged him tightly, grateful that at least he was okay. The locksmith finished his work, handed me the new keys, and I paid him $300 for the express service and his discretion. He left, wishing me luck and leaving me alone in my home, finally safe. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind replayed what had happened over and over: the betrayal, the confrontation, the liberation. But I felt no regret. I felt clarity. In the following days, I blocked my parents' numbers, their social media, their email addresses. I contacted the landlord of the house where they lived and notified him that I was canceling the lease agreement that I paid for. I contacted the utility companies and canceled the automatic payments I had set up. My parents tried to contact me in every possible way: unknown numbers, messages from other people's accounts, desperate emails. "Esteban, please, they're going to evict us. Son, think about it. We're your family. We don't have money to eat." I ignored everything. Every message, every call, every plea. 2 weeks later, I found out that my parents had been evicted from the house. My father was now working as a night watchman at a supermarket, and my mother was a cashier at a convenience store. They were living in a very basic, shared rented room, and they barely had enough to eat after paying rent. Good, I thought, without emotion. It was time for them to work like any responsible adults, to learn to manage their finances like I had to learn while giving them more than half my salary. Did I feel anything? Yes, relief. I felt like I could finally breathe without the burden of two capable adults who had always refused to stand on their own 2 feet. Weeks passed, and then months. My parents eventually stopped trying to contact me when they realized I wasn't going to give in. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they had finally accepted their new reality and that, surprisingly, their relationship had improved now that they had to work together as a team instead of just waiting for me to solve all their problems. I don't regret kicking them out. I don't regret cutting off the flow of money. I don't regret finally prioritizing myself after years of being their personal retirement plan. And I finally learned that the freedom to live your life without carrying the weight of capable adults who refuse to work is priceless. I am free now, living in my apartment that I bought with my own effort, enjoying the money I earned with my own work, building my future without the constant shadow of two people who confused being parents with owning a life insurance policy. And that freedom, that peace, that self-respect I finally found is worth more than any amount of guilt they tried to plant in me for all those years. Subscribe for more daily stories.